Welcome to KR Films Entertainment Channel. Today we will explain a 2015 Hollywood action-adventure movie Mad Max Fury Road. In a post-apocalyptic world where water is scarce and humanity has descended into chaos, Mad Max Fury Road follows the story of Imperator Furiosa, a warrior who rebels against the tyrannical rule of Immortan Joe, a ruthless leader who controls the water supply of his people, together with Max, a former captive. Furiosa embarks on a dangerous journey across the desert in a massive armored truck, facing explosive battles, sandstorms, and treacherous enemies along the way. The setting is one of turmoil and violence, where Max Rokostansky, a former police officer, must navigate a world where bloodshed is a constant. He seeks refuge in his powerful car, which could rival even James Bond's. Max's world is a post-apocalyptic wasteland where resources are scarce, and the strong prey on the weak. As a former police officer, Max has seen the worst of humanity and has become a survivor, seeking refuge in his car, which has become his home and his weapon. Max's car is a powerful machine, capable of taking on any challenge in the dangerous world he inhabits. It is equipped with a supercharger, a nitrous oxide system, and other modifications that make it a formidable vehicle. Max relies on his car to outrun and outgun his enemies, as well as to transport him across the vast desert. Food and water are hard to come by, and Max has resorted to chewing on lizards to survive. He is constantly on the move, trying to stay one step ahead of those who would do him harm. His life is one of solitude and desperation, as he struggles to find meaning in a world that has been destroyed by war and greed. Despite his exceptional driving abilities, Max is eventually captured by a group of war boys and taken to Immortan Joe, the primary antagonist. Joe has control over thousands of war boys and presides over a village of half-alive starving humans. He survives by wearing a full body suit that leaves only his eyes visible. And he uses his power to provide water to his subjects, the most valuable resource in this world. However, he does not distribute water through taps or containers but instead makes it rain down like a god. Meanwhile, the streets are about to get chaotic. Enter Imperator Furiosa, a dangerous woman with a robotic arm who carries her own steering wheel, much like everyone else in this world. With no car dealerships in sight, Furiosa leads the warboys to Gas Town and Bullet Farm to buy gasoline and bullets for her boss. However, she has her plans, defying Immortan Joe's orders and heading toward hostile territory in the east. But that's not all. Furiosa is accompanied by Immortan Joe's wives, who are pregnant with his children. These women, referred to as price breeders, are meant to bear Joe's offspring who will become warlords in the future. However, they have had enough of their oppressive situation and choose to escape with Furiosa, who promises to take them to a safer place known as the Green Place. This enrages Immortan Joe, who is furious at the betrayal and loss of his prized possessions. The warboys are dispatched to track down Imperator Furiosa. With the help of Gas Town and Bullet Farm, meanwhile, Max is still trapped in Joe's captivity, tied up with his face down and upper body restrained. He finds himself beside Nux, a sick war boy who is expected to pass away soon. However, when Nux learns of the hunt for Furiosa, he becomes filled with a thirst for battle and requests to join the warboys in their pursuit. Nux forces Max to become his blood bag, serving as his physical life support and leaving Max with no other option but to join the warboys on their adventure. As they hit the road, live rock bands provide war entertainment, adding to the chaos of their high-speed chase. Immortan Joe and his menacing children also join in the pursuit, with two factions now seeking vengeance against Furiosa. The first is Joe and his warboys, while the other is a group of Russian-speaking men. In an attempt to evade Joe's wrath, Furiosa leads the group into enemy territory, making them easy targets for a hostile group known as the Buzzers. A dirty war ensues between Furiosa's team and the Buzzers, with Furiosa expertly destroying their attackers with calculated shots. It isn't long before Joe's warboys enter the fray, fighting alongside Furiosa's team against the Buzzers. It is during this battle that Max and Furiosa first cross paths. If we momentarily set aside the deafening chaos and destruction of the ongoing war, one could easily mistake the scene for the beginning of a love story. However, any potential for romance is cut short by the next wave of violence. Although Furiosa may not be as physically powerful as Joe and his war boys, she more than makes up for it with her cunning intellect. She drives the rig into a sandstorm in hopes of losing her pursuers, but the determined Nux is willing to sacrifice himself to end her life. Unfortunately for Nux, his reckless road rage only results in Max's escape and the salvation of the rig containing Furiosa. Later on, Max encounters Furiosa repairing the damaged rig, where he also meets the pregnant wives for the first time. It becomes evident that Immortan Joe's desperation to retrieve his breeders stems from the fact that one of them is carrying his child. Meanwhile, Max and Furiosa's initial animosity towards each other during their tumultuous journey is palpable. However, they eventually realize that they share a common goal, so, being the gentleman that he is, Max steals the rig and offers to let Furiosa and the women accompany him, much to their mutual benefit. As a side note, Nux is not dead and tries to kill Furiosa, but he is no match for the combined strength of Max and Furiosa. Meanwhile, Gastown sends reinforcements to join Joe's army, and among them is the terrifying People Eater, whose iron nose makes him all the more intimidating. With Furiosa at the helm, Max and the group make their way through the desert with Joe's captive wives. Their journey takes them to a canyon controlled by a biker gang, with whom Furiosa had negotiated passage in exchange for 3,000 gallons of gasoline. However, the bikers become suspicious when they realize there are more than the expected number of vehicles following Furiosa. And things take a turn for the worse when Joe and his warboys show up, disrupting the fragile peace. The bikers engage in a fight with Furiosa and Max, while Joe and his warboys follow closely behind. Max's team emerges victorious, but this only brings Joe closer to them. As he approaches, he orders Nux to break into the war rig again. Max and Furiosa give the war boy a deserved thrashing, but tragedy strikes as Angarad, the pregnant wife, falls off the rig during the chase. Joe attempts to save her by swerving, but he ends up running her over and causing his vehicle to crash, as expected. Immortan Joe is enraged and determined to get his hands on Furiosa's head. Returning to the war rig, the group mourns the loss of Angarad. Max, curious about the green place, asks Furiosa what it is. She explains that it's a location she heard about when she was young, located in the eastern region. During the Soma moment, one of Joe's former war boys, Nux, is found at the back of the rig by one of the wives. Capable, she consoles him, and for the first time, we see him express emotions. The quiet moment is interrupted by the resumption of the war. This time, Furiosa, Max, and surprisingly, Nux, who is now part of the team, overcome Joe and his forces with mines planted in the swampy ground. Joe is forced to stop and mourn the loss of his unborn child while his allies from the Bullet Farm take up the fight. Although smarter than Joe's war boys, it takes a considerable amount of intelligence to defeat the Bullet Farmer. Following a successful battle, Furiosa manages to shoot the Bullet Farmer, causing him to lose his vision and giving the group an advantage. Max takes advantage of the situation by confronting the Bullet Farm army and returning with guns and bullets, leading to a night of intense swamp rides and shootouts. The morning brings renewed hope, but it is short-lived when the group encounters a peculiar woman, even stranger than any they've met before. After some investigation, this woman discovers that Furiosa was actually kidnapped from her tribe as a child. While this is already tragic, the real blow comes when they find out that the green place does exist, but it is no longer habitable. The group of women, referred to as mothers, reveal that the green place has been overrun by crows due to poisoned water and that they are the last surviving members of their kind. This realization forces the group, including the wives, to search for a new home. They decide to ditch the rig and instead opt for traveling deep into the desert on motorbikes. However, Max has an idea that involves going back to the Citadel, despite his haunting memories of a child he was unable to save. Initially seeming like a wild and unlikely plan, Max manages to persuade the group, including Furiosa, to follow his lead. The battle between Furiosa's group and Joe's war boys was intense and brutal. The clash of the two groups resulted in a high number of casualties on both sides, with the women from Furiosa's tribe being particularly hard hit. Unfortunately, even the formidable Furiosa was not immune to injury, and at the end of the battle, she suffered a severe wound. Despite the losses suffered by both sides, there were also some victories. Nux, who had previously been a devoted follower of Joe, made the ultimate sacrifice by killing Joe's son Rictus and, in turn, sacrificing his own life for the cause. It was a moment of redemption for Nux, who had previously been a fervent believer in Joe's twisted ideology. As the battle came to a close, it was clear that Furiosa's group had emerged victorious. The last thing that Immortan Joe saw before he died was Furiosa's face. It is difficult to know what was going through his mind in those final moments, but one can only imagine that he was filled with rage and a desire for revenge against the woman who had taken his wives and, ultimately, his life. Despite the extreme nature of Furiosa's actions, it is difficult to argue that Immortan Joe did not deserve what he got. He was a brutal and tyrannical leader who had inflicted untold suffering on those under his control. In the end, it was a victory for justice and the oppressed, and Furiosa and her allies emerged as heroes who had stood up to the forces of evil and emerged victorious. Upon returning to the citadel, the people rejoice in the downfall of Immortan Joe, who had once controlled their water supply with an iron fist. They cheer for Furiosa and the other women who had helped in their liberation. However, it becomes clear that Max has no interest in ruling or taking charge. He simply looks at Furiosa before walking away, suggesting that his journey is not yet over. He may seek further adventure or redemption, and only time will tell. Overall, the character development of Max and Furiosa throughout the movie is noteworthy, as they both start as solitary warriors with their own motivations, but gradually form a bond and work together towards a common goal that brings us to the end. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.